Today we're going to practice 3 new value building techniques. We're going to start by sketching a rectangle for our first value scale, big enough to hold about 7 squares. Then we're going to divide our rectangle into those 7 squares. The first technique we're going to do is called cross-hatching. There is another technique called hatching, and that's when you use parallel lines and vary the weight and thickness as you build value. But with cross-hatching, you're going to start with hatching and then cross lines over those first parallel lines. I know that sounded confusing, but if you see, I'm first starting by hatching in one direction. I'm going diagonal, and then I'm going to cross over those lines going diagonal the opposite way. And now this is called cross-hatching. As I build up my value and make my boxes darker shades, you're going to see me make my lines closer together and start pressing a little bit harder on my paper, but not hard enough to rip the paper. The closer you make your lines together, the darker your boxes or your value will appear, and the further you make your lines apart, the lighter the value will appear. And it's always best to work from light to dark when shading or building up any kind of value. As I'm getting further down my value scale, to make my values appear a little darker, you'll see me start cross-hatching diagonally, going both directions, and then you'll see me cross-hatch horizontal and vertical. This technique makes my value appear a little more darker, and I make my lines closer together to give it even more of a deeper shade. After creating the value scale, I want you to sketch a sphere, and then we're going to use that cross-hatching technique to build value and make the sphere appear three-dimensional. To turn the circle into a three-dimensional sphere, I'm going to use the regular hatching method, making my lines parallel, but notice how I'm curving them around the sphere instead of drawing them straight across. This helps give the illusion of a three-dimensional object instead of a 2D object. Now that I've finished hatching, I'm going to go into the cross-hatching method. And now you'll see me building up my value by making my lines a little closer together. And this is giving me kind of a value in the range of a 4. The closer you make your lines together, the darker they'll appear. And you can also vary the pressure of your pencil, pressing slightly harder just to make your lines appear a little more dark. And then lighten up to make your lines appear a little lighter. Building value with this technique means you need to make sure that you're crossing over in multiple directions, diagonally going both ways, horizontally and vertically. The next technique we're going to do is called scribbling or scumbling. I want you to start by sketching another rectangle. When building value, always remember to go light to dark. So you'll see me start by using light pressure and scribbling in multiple directions. The further I get down the value scale, the harder I press on the pencil and the closer my lines are to each other. Now with this method, you can also use circular motions, but I like to use various different directions when I'm sketching. Now I'm going to use this method to shade a sphere. First, I'll label my value scale from 1 to 7, just so I know which range my shades are in. Now back to sketching. So I'm sketching out a circle so I can add my value and make this look more three-dimensional. I'm then going to add a little area to show which direction the light is coming from. In this, the light is coming from the top right area. Then I'm going to use that scribbling or scubbling method, starting very softly around my sphere. Now, since this is a round object, instead of using circular motions and just going left to right, I move all around this sphere and I curve my lines a little bit. No matter what value building technique you use, it's always good to remember to work from light to dark and to work in multiple layers. My first layer was very light and I used light pressure. Now my second layer, I'm using medium pressure to hard pressure and I'm going over these areas multiple times. Those are layers. Now the last technique I'm going to show you is called stippling. I'm going to start by sketching a rectangle from my value scale and then sketching 7 different squares within it. The key to this stippling technique is to use dots. The further the dots are, the lighter the value appears, and the closer the dots are, the darker the value appears. Now this technique takes a very long time, so it is key to be patient. Like I mentioned, to create this lighter value, I'm placing my dots further apart from each other. And to create my darker values, I'm placing the dots closer to each other. Although I'm using pencil for this demonstration, I believe this technique works best with mediums like pen, ink, and marker. It just creates darker values and it's easier to build up that value quicker. Lastly, I'm going to use that stippling technique to create value on a sphere.